Listen, Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. That's the first line from Slaughterhouse-Five, the novel by Kurt Vonnegut. If you're not familiar, it's a semi-autobiographical story of a regular guy who is occasionally abducted by aliens. That's the semi part. But these aliens don't experience time in a linear fashion the way we do. So our hero, Billy, is forced to just move back and forth through time, experiencing all the events of his life out of order: old age, youth, his career, his family, his marriage, and most poignantly, his service in World War II, where, as a German prisoner of war, he witnesses, as the author did, the firebombing of Dresden and the horrible aftermath. I love this book. That's a weird thing to say after the Dresden thing, but as with most of his writing, yes, there's brutal honesty, but Vonnegut weaves in so much heart and beauty and even whimsy into the way he tells the story. And the way that Billy views the world, even at its worst, has always been comforting to me. I first read it, like many of you, in high school because a teacher made me. But I've read it dozens of times since. I always thought that the time travel was just a clever way to tell the story. And then one bright, beautiful summer day in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was out walking into town, doing the very important business of getting some coffee. And as I walked to the end of a tall, yellow-bricked building, an older black man emerged around the corner. There wasn't anything extraordinary about his appearance, except that his close-cropped hair was dyed a very particular shade of reddish pink. And I wanted to say, hi, I know this is incredibly rude, but can I ask why you picked that color? But I couldn't ask him because I wasn't in Greensboro anymore. I was kneeling down on the deck of a C-130 cargo plane somewhere over Afghanistan in 2008, leaning over my patient who was an enemy combatant. This was the enemy I had traveled 7,000 miles from my home to help fight. And now he was my patient. Because that's something we do as Americans. When our enemies are no longer a threat to us, if they're injured, we treat them. He had been in a firefight with Marines earlier that day, and a grenade had exploded too close to him. There was a lot of confusion as to whether it was ours or theirs. Doesn't matter. And so his head and his eyes were all wrapped in gauze. The rest of him was wrapped in a rug that they had taken from someone's house to use as an impromptu litter. A beautiful pattern that was thick with dust and blood and other things, all of it strapped to the floor of the aircraft with cargo straps. It's not difficult to imagine how terrifying that must be. You're blind, captured, you're taken from the place that you know, you're put on an airplane probably for the first time in your life. And so, as I tended to his wounds, and I tried to reassure him with the very few words of Dari that I spoke, I was struck by two things. The first is that he looked older than anyone fighting a war should look. The second, as I leaned down to hear him over the roar of the wind and the engines, so close that I could feel his breath on my ear, as he spoke words in a language I wish I'd understood, was the wisp of hair that poked out from his bandages. That, in the tradition of the Afghan elders, had been dyed with henna, and that mixed with blood had colored it a very particular shade of reddish pink. And then I was in Greensboro again. And I remember not feeling any particular way about that. There was no confusion, no panic, just a calm recognition that I was there now, but that I hadn't been. And that moment finally made me realize what Vonnegut had been trying to tell me all those years about what war had done to him. And it turns out what war had done to me. What war does to the people it doesn't kill. And then on a bright, beautiful summer day in Greensboro, North Carolina, I walked into town and I got some coffee. So it goes. Thank you.